One of this year's nominated documentary shorts at this year's Oscars is the very wonderfully titled "How Learning to Skateboard in a Warzone If You're a Girl," and we are currently joined by the director of that documentary, Carol Dysinger. Carol, thanks so much for joining us. The first question I got to ask you is, how did you first learn about Skatistan and this organization and what they do?
Well, thank you so much. I've been filming in Afghanistan for 2005, since 2005. I've been filming there for almost 15 years. And I made a movie called Camp Victory Afghanistan, and I have another one that'll be coming out soon called One Bullet. And these are about, hardships and the army training and a lot of more journalistic things. But because I'm a woman, when we would go to an Afghan man's house, I was one of the few people able to go into the kitchen, And the minute you walk through that curtain, you're just a woman, and baby. Somebody, steals your lipstick. I mean, and then you walk back out and you're a Western person in a man's world. And I always wanted to make a movie about Afghan girls, but I couldn't figure out how to get them on film. So Orlando von Einsiedel had made a short called Skatistan about 2010 when Camp Victory came out. And I had heard about Skatistan. It's a really well-regarded NGO in the Afghanistan, circles. So when A&E decided they wanted a girls' version of Skatistan and called Orlando and his company Grain, they called me because I'm a woman who works in Afghanistan a lot, and I just had to do it because I knew, because I had been going there for so long and had, I knew there was a way with skateboarding where I could really get you to see these girls for who they really are. So it was kind of converging Annie's desire to do a female version of Orlando's short and my desire to write a love letter to my favorite thing about Afghanistan, which is the girls.
And it really, the love that you have for these subjects really does come across in this.
Okay.
And one of the things I was curious about also is, did it take some persuading to get the people at Skatistan to agree to be part of this filmmaking? Because they talk about how they're always under constant threat, and even one of your subjects in the film wouldn't show her face, because of the, I'm guessing out of fear of reprisal. Did it take any persuading to get them to say yes to doing this?
I wouldn't call it, it's not that it took persuading. It took some confidence building that I and my all-female crew, which was 3 Western women and 2 Afghan women, that we understood the nature of the limitations that they needed to place on us. I had no problem with that. I'd been dealing with about my safety or the Western women's safety. It's more about the girls' safety and the women's safety. So the struggle was to try to make it look as if there was no limitation other than the limitations the girl themselves experienced. But there are many, many things we did, none of which I'm going to tell you, to safeguard them. So it's more, Skatistan, the international organization that raises the money from the skateboarding community, they're protective of all of their parks. They have them in South Africa and whatever, but especially about the ones in Afghanistan. And I had no problem with that. I was just like, we just came up with a way and made sure we had permission from the parents involved, that we had, and I think the one who didn't show her face, it wasn't so much that she thought she would be in danger. It was more she just, which she said to me is, "Oh, my brothers will tease me until the day I die," which is kind of, but she wasn't afraid for her life. She just, she just didn't want to. And I thought it was interesting that who spoke English, drives a car, which of course you don't see, went to college and skateboards and doesn't want to show her face. I thought that was a way of sort of busting the myth of, the blur-faced woman living in fear. It's a choice she made, taking lots of things into consideration. It wasn't out of fear, really.
Okay, well, I'm actually relieved to hear that. I'm very relieved to hear that. Staying on that theme of the constant threat that they're always under, that a place like that is always under. Were you and your crew ever present during for like a fear of of something happening to the school?
Well, I'm sorry. The fear of something happening to the school, I have to say, a bit of a digression. Working in Afghanistan as long as I have, I really learned that danger, is a situation, and fear is an emotion. And often you're in more danger when you're not afraid than when you are. But in terms of us anticipating any problems, it's a very well-guarded place, and I made very sure in the way I filmed it that you don't where you are in this city. And it's very well protected. But the Roshan bomb, the big Roshan bomb, did go off, I think, just as we were leaving. But it didn't reach the school. The school has only been touched by that kind of thing, like once or twice, and once peripherally, which I mentioned in the film, and another time, peripherally that happened recently. But, it's kind of like if you live in LA and every time someone made a movie about LA, they opened with all the earthquake footage. Or if they made a movie about New York City, they opened with all the 9/11 footage. It's weird being in a place like that because stuff happens and it isn't safe, but you have to be careful. But it sort of reminded me of 70s New York, you have to be careful. And I don't think we were ever in direct danger, but we had to be careful.
So I want to turn this, take a bit of a pivot here, talk about a bit of a policy thing. So I'm curious as to, do you have any idea, because I'm asking from the perspective of the people that work at Skatistan as instructors and, trying to enrich the lives of these young girls. Do you have any idea as to what their feelings are towards the American troops in Afghanistan and the current and past administration's efforts to negotiate with the Taliban, since they are really the root of the oppression that would keep girls from attending a place like this?
Well, it's such a complicated place. It's very hard to describe. When I first started filming there, when the Americans first went in, the American soldiers felt like they were in a war zone, but for the Afghans, it felt like peace because they'd been in the midst of a civil war for so long, and under the rule of the Taliban. I don't think anyone thinks that America, negotiating with the Taliban without the Afghan government in the room is wisdom of any kind. But I'm not sure that, but I don't know, it's hard to say. I don't want to speak for them at all. I really don't. I don't want to speak for them because I'm sure they have very complicated ideas about it, but they sure don't want the Taliban in power again. But I don't know that that's what's being negotiated. But again, the Afghan government should be at the table.
Fair enough. I completely understand not wanting to speak for them.
Yeah.
So, you had that really powerful ending to the movie where you have the girls talking about what they want to be
Yeah.
And it's so. But I'm curious, how difficult will it be for these girls to be able to achieve those dreams once they graduate out of Skatistan?
Well, it depends which dream you're talking about, because it's so hard for the one girl to be a pilot, because there are women in the Afghan Air Force. And there's actually a famous Afghan woman who did something. She flew an airplane around the world or across Europe or something. So they do, and because the Soviet Union was in charge of the place for a bit, they did set up a kind of women in the military tradition. So there were women, in the Air Force. So being a pilot, she could do that. Being an eye surgeon, I don't know. I mean, she would have to get through a lot of school, and it would depend on her family's financial ability. But it's possible. It's possible. But I think the thing with the Afghanistan that I really liked and really enjoyed is, when I was a little girl, I wanted to be a Supreme Court justice. And that was in 1962, So you want to be something and you end up being something. But the fact that you can become something is what's important. Maybe it starts out as an actress or an international spy and you end up being a filmmaker,
You speak with such reverence for the country and the people of Afghanistan. What do you, in your opinion, this is just strictly in your opinion, what is the thing about Afghanistan that is the most endearing to you personally?
I have a long list, but Afghanistan is a nation of poets, and very few people realize this. Very few Americans, or I don't know, it's hard to say. So many of the major world poets came from there, and so many of the people have long stretches of Hafez memorized, and it's kind of like their antidote to the heavy Quranic, push of Al Qaeda or that kind of thing, because someone will say, well, the Quran says, okay, I might say, yes, but Hafez says, it's kind of, they have this wonderful fluidity, and this poetry. Literally, I'd be going around with the military, and we'd be going in for something where we're going to dig a well in some village out in the middle of nowhere. And I would have my translator turn to one of the older men and say, what would Hafez say upon this occasion? And this old guy would stick his hand behind his back and start declaiming Hafez, I just loved it. It reminded me so much of my grandfather, who was an Italian immigrant who couldn't really read or write. He pretended he could, but but he could quote Dante at length. And God knows where he learned it. It could have been just on a radio show or something, but it's just that he was illiterate, but he furnished his mind with this poetry. And Afghanistan, it's such a, I went a little crazy on the roses in the movie, the roses, the fruit, the almonds, the mulberries, the people and the landscape. I just wish they could get 5 minutes of peace so I could take all my friends over there and feed them and show them this beautiful place. It's a deeply complicated place filled with history, and it deserves some time off, for God's sake.
I think when you think about how we talk about how long the troops have been there, and they've been there almost 20 years now, but you think to yourself also the Afghan people that have been living there, they've been living through so much, because of course for them it goes beyond that, and it's a familial thing also, I'm guessing. So I do want to talk about this great news you got last week. When you got nominated for the Oscar for Best Documentary Short Subject. What was your reaction, and what was that like, finding that out?
Well, I don't know. I have to tell you, I got a Student Academy Award in 1977, when I was very young, handed to me for a narrative short I did called 16 Down, and it was given to me by Frank Capra, who kissed me on. I wish I'd made that movie, right? So I was young enough to think that that meant the hard part was over. I think I got up and said to the audience, well, I'll be next year in a movie theater near you or something, because I had absolutely no idea about what it was, the lack of women in the director's chair. You know, I was 18, maybe 19. So I went through, God, I mean, whoever said it was a glass ceiling is like wrong. It's not glass. It's see-through, but it's not glass. And after years and years of I don't even want to go through it. I started teaching because I didn't want to try. I was done. I was in my 40s and I was done. So I started teaching, which was fantastic, and I loved it, and it gave me the freedom to move into documentary and and go to Afghanistan and film in Afghanistan. So having gone through this life loop, to come back and be nominated for a real Oscar with a short about skateboarding, I mean, it's just such a grand boof, it's such a grand laugh to like the whole battle and thing. It's just funny. So it was wonderful news, but it had a lot of poetic ramifications, if you know what I mean.
Well, Carol, I can't thank you enough for joining us. We're wishing you all the best in February. And to all of our readers and viewers, please go to goldderby.com and make your predictions. Oh, yes. Did you want to add one more thing? Yeah,
one thing. If you want to see the movie, if you Google Learning to Skateboard A&E, it's streaming on the A&E streaming thing. In America, I don't know how you can see it overseas, sadly, because it's nominated for a BAFTA as well, which is really crazy. But so I hope you like it. I wanted to make a movie about Afghanistan that people wanted to see, not took like medicine. So, and I'm very grateful to you and to the Academy for this recognition, more for the girls' sake than my own, but it is sort of nice anyway. Great.
And just one last reminder to go to Gold Derby and make your predictions and see if you can outsmart the smartest prognosticators in Hollywood. Again, Carol, thanks so much for joining us.
Thank you very, very much.